Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Whoa, what a crazy surprise. It's Sam Tripoli.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Are you really, you're not like a clone, you're actually the real Sam Tripoli?
Well, in the great words of Dave Chappelle, how would I know if I was a clone?
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, the mind-melting technology they have these days. Well, the Tinfoil Hat podcast is a really, I think everyone wants to be watching that show, so you've done a really good thing with that.
There's tens of people that watch it. I don't know what the real numbers are. I would tell you I think a lot more people watch it than the numbers say. But there's also part of me that thinks that part of my ego wants that. So, we're pulling it off of YouTube this probably any day now. I'm going to pull it off of YouTube, all the old episodes as well.
I saw you synchronize it to Odyssey, though, so you can watch it, you can see it there, which is cool.
Yeah, and people got to just get off of YouTube for conspiracy content. Now, if you want other stuff, you should totally go there.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with that, but it's like if you're looking for conspiracy content, YouTube doesn't want there anymore. So stop crying about it and go to these other websites that are welcoming that type of
Well, the thing is, for me, it's not just a conspiracy. Like, they've made that word into a bad word. The thing is, it's history too. It's fake news, and now new fake news becomes old fake history in a couple of years, and then we have that as the things we're believing. You have to wonder, how far back does fake news go? Does it go like literally thousands of years?
Oh, well, I've had people come on telling me all history is fake, and I don't know how they go much deeper than that. They go into that the Roman Church never existed, Tartary, which I know you're an expert in, and stuff like that. And I don't know. I don't know. It's like, we get into Rothschild discussions, and, how much of that are they actually control of, or are they just puppets
of the bank, the Vatican Bank,
Well, I mean, are they the ones calling shots, or are they the ones put forward as the boogeyman while somebody else calls the shot?
If you've heard of them, chances are they're not at the top. I think that's kind of.
And there's so many layers to this, and there's so many groups. I don't believe one group controls everything.
Right. It's
I think
chaos.
Multiple groups. And they work together when they want to, and then they have no problems with slitting each other's throats.
That tends to be my hypothesis or theory, is that the world's made up of relationships. So you've got people that work together, they meet each other, there's all kinds of that. But there's also love relationships, like Ford and Firestone married their kids together. So you will see dynasties, you're going to see family lines, and there are certain families that become butlers forever, or they become bankers forever. Like, a lot of the time, you might have the same line trained to do the same kind of job. But we're starting to break into that point where we're remodeling the world. How much of it is organized? Like the Vatican bank system is like way more interesting than any one family.
No, yeah, but is it the Vatican, or is it the black nobility? Who is that?
The Teutonic nobility is interesting. The Germanic Teutonic families, but
Germanic Teutonic.
Yeah, well, that's the black nobility. So you're talking about like the World Wildlife Foundation's Prince Bernhard. Prince Bernhard basically started Bilderberg. He was related into the Dutch royal family. The Dutch royal family is really kind of more interesting than people think about, because you have to imagine,
they're part of that Fall of the Cabal. Did you ever see that 10-part movie?
If you just think about the family lines, right? We're thinking like everyone's a self-made man in their first generation. The Spanish controlled Holland, and before that, the Caliphate, which was the thing that took over Khazar. Khazaria was controlled by the Umayyad Caliphate, which became the Cordoba Caliphate once it got to Spain. So the word tulip and turban are, they mean basically turbine, and have to do with the windmills in Holland. There's some really weird connections, But Holland has what was the Spanish royal family. They hated each other, and so they became their own nobility through the Saxon-Coburg von Goth family. And the Saxon-Coburg von Goth family, that's what created the House of Wilhelm, which is the House of Windsor, which is the royal British family. They're not at the top. There's like a higher Saxon-Coburg von Goth family.
Jesus.
Yeah, so when you start thinking about the families, like, really it does come down to, like, there's some families that have a lot of wealth, have had it early on, and it's self-replicating wealth. Fractional reserve banking is replicating their wealth, and it's causing inflation, so anyone with less than that wealth, they can't generationally store it. 100 years later, your money's not worth the same. It's pretty clever,
What about the what's the family? Hold on 1 second.
Sure.
I find out.
This is the cool thing that we can look stuff up, and we're down to do it. By the way,
what is the? Hold on. Let me see. She was in. The Bazaar family.
the Bazaar family. Where are they from?
So So the whole thing is that the people who actually own most of America, if not in particular, they own the New York State Federal Reserve, which all the money comes through, is the Bazaar family.
Interesting.
The Bazaar family is French royals.
Yeah.
That David Bazaar was smuggled out of the United States. The Freemasons had him under. They had they beheaded his family, his mother and father. Antoinette, was that her name?
Antoinette?
Yeah.
It's the Bazaar family connect. Wow, trippy.
So
he's like
they got him out to England, and the royal family took him under his protection, and they gave him all this land and all this money to go there, and he basically bought and created everything.
Wow.
Yeah, the Bazars.
That's a trip. And you look at the New York Planning Commission and the amount of money.
The trains, they owned all the trains.
Right.
They owned all the telegraphs. They owned
crazy.
You go down a list of things that they technically own. They technically the thing about say digital currency and why people don't like XRP is because it's a banking coin. And they haven't released all the coins. The point is you're supposed to release all the coins.
Yeah.
But they've kept a giant chunk of them.
It's super
so they can always release a little bit more.
And mess with inflation.
Yes.
That's dangerous. Yeah.
Yes.
Rippletillion, I'm not down. There's so many better coins.
Well, there's so many better coins. But I own chunks of these coins that I'm just waiting for the next Ave to blow up that I was saying yesterday, and I've said on multiple of my podcasts. It went from 50 cents to $500 in 1 year.
Right.
You find that. You have enough of the next coin that does that. And as more and more people move to digital currency and they see Bitcoin's worth, let's say, $48,000, they don't understand they can buy little pieces. Yeah. So they want to buy whole chunks of these other things. These other coins are naturally going to grow up. Blow up.
There's definitely a Ponzi scheme to real dollars. Dollars are definitely a Ponzi scheme, and it's not backed by gold. It's backed by your back. How much labor you can contract from someone.
100%.
But with Bitcoin and with a lot of these cryptocurrencies, it's a service trade, so that is worth something. If you the Odyssey videos are actually giving me data, so it's worth something for me to see the thing. A video trucker is going to seed it. This is the kind of all these tokens that actually do something, and they remove the bank usually, and they turn one of us into a witness.
That's what the coins I'm what is this coin used for?
Yeah, Chainlink is cool for that. A lot of the coins they're really embedding.
I have it on my other phone. I've been buying a couple of them, like Decentraland.
Yeah,
have you seen that one?
Smart.
That is the coin that's going to be used for all the basically people buying virtual land and how they're interacting in that virtual land.
Real T is a real estate coin, and it's really great because you can imagine buying old buildings together. Fractions of it because you have contracts. It's pretty sweet.
So, but the reason I brought up RXP is because that's what they believe, the Bazaar family, and they may not be in power as much, but no, they own so much of every Fortune 500 company that they only release a part of the stock.
Yeah.
So you can never own the whole. They will always own the largest part of every Fortune 500.
That's that thing. Everyone talks about this pyramid as the main symbol. It should really be a trapezoid, because there's a pyramid above a trapezoid, but we can only get to a certain level of the upper middle class where they drop you off again and you fall back to the bottom. But there's like above it is an entire different thing. So there's the royalty, and then there's the foundlings, and these foundlings are just, you can imagine so many of these kids who've come through like a church orphanage, and the tens of thousands of, this is a big thing with the Tartary story, is kids get orphaned. The Catholic Church would say your parents were too young, or they weren't married right, or they couldn't raise you, and you get 40,000 kids on boats sent from one country to another, from one Catholic orphanage in Canada to Russia, and back and forth. And so you imagine you're like 8 years old or 2 years old, who knows, like you could be brand new, or you could be kind of already invested in your culture, and then they erase it at like that point. You have to learn all a new language. And that's a big part of what I think we're seeing with the reset that's coming. We were talking earlier about Generation X, Y, Z. What happens after that? Grape soda. Like, we're going to reset. Like, that's...
Grape soda. So we're trying to come up with the next generation, which would be my children's generation. They're one, and we just want to start it as grape soda.
I mean, it could work. You could easily...
We just have to keep talking about it.
Otherwise, we're just going to start over, and that's the thing. Trying to keep something is good.
So like, it's like, I love your mind, dude, and I love all the information. I'm really excited to talk about, hear what you have to say. No, I'm being dead serious. It's just like, Khazarians is such a dangerous conversation.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Khazarians are such a... it's just because there's so much knowledge out there.
It doesn't have to be. That's the crazy thing. People make it into this thing because it has to do with people's... In history, you're always going to be finding people that are connected to things. And when things are connected, then they're going to fight with each other. They're constantly going to say, oh, well, this represents me, or this thing hurt me. And, it's like if we were talking about Germany, right? We could talk about Germany in the 1800s. We can talk about Germany in the 1970s. There's a point in German history where it becomes really touchy, And
for sure.
The same thing happens with any culture. You could say the same thing. Like in the 1990s in Israel, like we're having the same kind of arguments like started to escalate. Khazaria is one of those stories where a bunch of different people were there and a bunch of different things happened. Georgia, going back, is where the Denisovan are from. So it's not just like different kinds of people.
Denisovan, who are they?
So you've seen like Homo sapiens and you've seen Neanderthal.
Okay, so this was very interesting because you were getting into this. Andreas was getting into this during the UFC about different body types and stuff like that. So
there's a thing where we think that we're the apex evolution of man and that everything before us is less and we're the best, and it's just not true. You can read Sapiens, you can look into a lot of archaeology, physical anthropology will show there have been bigger, smarter, stronger, diverse kinds of humans that have simultaneously existed. So that's the thing. It's not that we're coming out of Neanderthal, we're less or more. It's like there was a time when Neanderthal were thriving, and they're specific to northwestern Europe at that point. The Denisovan are more Eastern Europe, and they even got into Indonesia. And so that
what's the difference?
That's weird. So like a lot of animals can't breed back and forth and keep having children, which is because the promoter sequences in the DNA will have different kinds of data that is a specific type, and that type is stored in a kind of information that can't be read by the other species, and so it won't be able to create a perfect breedable species. So for whatever reason we can, and we know that because almost all Caucasian people have Neanderthal DNA from 1 to 5%, which is impressive to imagine that 95% of them are related to like standard Homo sapiens, but that they have also Denisovan in Eastern Europe, and the Eastern Asians, you have Furiensis, which is the Homo Furiensis is the Hobbit people. They're the really small people. And then there are people that are half Denisovan, half Furiensis, or, to an extent, but they're still Homo sapien. So they're like, it's like Bigfoot stuff, but genetics. And you're like, oh wow, there really are different kinds of bipedal humanoids that existed, and I'm related to different ones of them. And it wasn't long ago we couldn't prove that. It was like 4 or 5 years ago. So now that we have DNA evidence, you're like, oh yeah, chromosomes, your genome, it shows that you have Neanderthal, and he has Denisovan, and she has Furiensis. And
so within racial groups, can you have that?
Totally, but that it's more complicated too because we interacted so much more than people realize. We weren't nearly as separated for as long as people think they were. And with boats, people were going like I was saying with Indonesia and Russia, they were going all over the place. And then if you get before the Tartars into the Phoenicians, which the Phoenicians is a made-up word for a bunch of different kinds of people that you
so interesting. Tartary is such an interesting conversation.
It's a trip, and especially it's a Tripoli. But once you look at the capital of Phoenicia was Tar, and that the Khazarian kings, we have Tarmac, right, and Tarkhan, and those were during the Caliphate the most important people. Tarkhan is a military position for Khazarians. Tar is huge. Tar is everywhere you go,
Holy fuck, dude. It's just so we had these guys on the podcast, and they were like, the Roman Empire never existed. I go, what? They go, it never existed, and their theory is it didn't exist, and Tartaria was really it, but the powers that be don't want anyone to know about Tartaria.
Yeah, so I would say the evidence that the Catholic Church exists now...
No, not the Catholic Church. The Roman Empire,
excuse me. Oh, the Roman Empire. Okay,
Roman Empire.
The Roman Empire existed to an extent, but even that's... The beginning of their history is the raping of Tarpeia, right? The sacking of the Sabines. So you have Etruscans, Etar-Ruska, which has to do with Etar. Ruska is the Rus, were the Scandinavian Russian people that were traveling all over the place. You have redheads, Gales, Croatians, Hrvats, all Hrvats, the Croatians, that's where the tie comes from, the cravat, they spoke a language that was a Slavic Indo-Aryan language. So that's the other way is you see that there's Ugaric languages and there's Sanskrit languages. So the Sanskrit languages, you say Mama Nama means my name is in Sanskrit. In ancient, in German, mein Namen, mein Namen, Mama Nama. Ancient Sanskrit, India, modern Germany, very close connected. And a lot of words, like the Greek words, are actually Sanskrit words, which were Tartarian words, But there's a whole thing with the Roman Empire because their whole story is that they took other people's kids and created foundlings. So
what are foundlings?
Foundlings are orphans essentially raised by this new state. And so in any reset, what you would do is you take the sons, you kill the fathers, and you make them into the frontline soldiers that get killed first. Or they're the ones that run machines. What's weird is often they'll be raised by someone and loved so much they'll be given a good position. Historically, that happens a lot. In Brazil.
Say that. What does that mean?
So let's say that somebody important, like a Freemason or a Jesuit, they raise someone's kid. Maybe it's their own kid because they had sex with locals, but maybe not. Maybe it was literally someone's kid. They'll raise often that kid and give them authority or power in a position somewhere. They might become an important police detective in France or in Belgium in the 1800s.
Jesus
and
Christ.
The Catholic Church, that's their whole liberation theology. The Jesuit mission about Paraguay? Paraguay is a whole other trip besides Tartaria. So, if you talk about the Catholic Church and the Romans, there is an important link there because there is this idea that the Phoenicians are before, the Tartarians are kind of after, and then the Jesuits. There's a thing, what flamenco, Anatoly flamenco, Okay, so this idea that the last 2,000 years are actually stacked on top of each other by the Catholic Church to hide what happened about the Dark Ages. So what it means is that 700 and 1700 often are in historical records are the same year, and some things we think happened in the 700s happened in the 1700s.
Whoa, dude.
So that's trippy with you about Islam, because Islam is supposed to be in the 700s, but in 1699 the Jesuits were excommunicated. The entire Jesuit order of priests were excommunicated from the Catholic Church. They were removed from the Catholic Church. They weren't allowed to be Catholic. At that point, a third of Japan was Catholic. Maybe half of Japan was Catholic, not Buddhist.
And why were they excommunicated?
Well, the Jesuits had so much power. They controlled Paraguay. They turned Paraguay into 99% literate state. They have liberation theology, so they're making all these missions and training the altar boys to be priests who study, math and science and astronomy and everything else. So they were very powerful. And
are your opinion, are the Jesuits good guys or bad guys?
Yeah, definitely. And
I think
it's
guys?
I think it's a really dangerous idea to make you choose between that about someone who's probably lived a long life, and if you're saying that about an entire group of people, then you should probably assume that they have good and bad qualities. Almost any character in the Bible has sins, right? Even like Daniel and Joseph, etc. So, yeah, they're probably good and bad guys. And the Jesuits have definitely helped a lot of people. And they've definitely done amazing things for science and medicine and education. But yeah, are there bad people that are Jesuits? I'm sure. And have there been through history? Well, the thing about the Jesuits is, first off, a third of Japan, you can read Endo's Silence or watch Scorsese's movie with Garfield and Adam Driver and Adam Garfield. Like, there's a movie, like, they crucified Catholics everywhere. So Japan was just slaughtering their people because they become Catholic. And the Jesuits went into hiding. There's a triple alliance war in South America where Brazil, Bolivia, and Argentina all kill 99% of the population of Paraguay. And at this point, 99% of, like almost 100% of Paraguay could read and write and were like university educated in the 1700s. They had electricity, it was a completely different world, at this time. So when the Jesuits were wiped out, I mean, it was bad what they did to them probably, because there's a lot of really good people there. It couldn't have all been bad. But somebody in the Vatican went mafia moment there. 50 years go by, we don't know for sure, it's like the Matrix, but after 50 years, the Jesuits have, through Catherine the Great, manipulated the Franciscans to put in, which is another order of monks and priests, to put in a guy who becomes the Pope. And when this happens, they dig up the dead body of the Pope from before, and they put it on trial. And they excommunicate the Pope, and they pull the Pope's soul out of heaven and put his soul into hell. And this is a Jesuit story.
What?
Yeah, and then what they say, with alcohol, right, we have the Prohibition, and it shows how we had a Prohibition, and then we don't have a Prohibition. But you see it in the Constitution. What they did was they just ripped out the page. They ripped out all of the history, 50 years of history from the Catholic Vatican. So we don't know what year it is exactly, except for from Gregorian Math, which is why...
What year do you think it is?
That's all. Okay, there's two sides to this. First off, the Freemasons who were involved, like the Freemasons were involved a lot of the time in America because at that point the Jesuits weren't allowed to be part of the Catholic Church, right? So they had to work with something. So they had been working with Lord, Adam Weishaupt, and you've heard the whole thing with Ben Stewart's, esoteric agendas. The Freemasons were like the YMCA, and they put money into their buildings, and then they had back rooms, and but they were, a men's group basically. So you have a bunch of these Moorish Americans a lot of the time. So, I mean, Ben Franklin was probably maybe like octamaroon, partially black. And a lot of these guys were. George Washington might have even been. Yeah.
Ben Franklin was half black.
Maybe not half black, but like maybe more like an eighth black. Like there's a lot of evidence that some of these, like Thomas Jefferson was probably also partially black. Jose Francia, who was the leader of Paraguay at the time, was also partially black. You start finding that this was a common thing. There was governors in Louisiana that were partially black, and it wasn't politically that important, except for in other countries where it was unusual still. But they would wear wigs and they had, makeup. Like Maurice Chevalier is a very famous French African composer and fencer and swordsman, but he's always presented himself wearing white powder and white makeups because that was the aesthetic of the time. And it's not like that everyone for sure was, but Prince wasn't fully wrong. There really are.
So do you think everything is a lie?
Most things are lies, or they're discreetly
so interesting,
truths,
and I totally agree with what you're saying, dude. And like people just can't come to grips with that. And I don't know if the answer is the complete and utter answering to it, but it's like I always. I don't know if the answer is a complete and utter exposing of, hey, here's what really went on. I just don't know if anyone has the energy to do that, and two, if it would do anything.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends. So, for the last few years, our group, the Tartary Nova Discord, and our researchers have been living in what feels like an alternate reality. Because, I used to work at CNN, and I used to work with people that write fake news, and I used to have to help. And, one of my last major things with Flight 370, where it was, we could look around the world where it was, and we could find out basically like a lot of things about this area and what military bases are there in Carmen Diego Garcia and like where in the world.
I've been to Diego Garcia.
What? That's crazy.
I did a military comedy tour there.
Whoa.
And when you fly there, you're like, why? How did they discover this fucking island?
That's a trip, man. That's a Tripoli right there.
Yeah.
That's a trip. Man, because that's, that was a British military base that was Dutch. And so, like, Formosa and Taiwan, Taiwan used to be a Dutch place called Dutch Formosa. And a lot of these places were run by the Dutch East Indies and discovered. And that place was used by the British in a trade, and then they rent it to the CIA. So it's like crazy weird backstory for that island. I don't know. But like,
how do you know all this?
Well, again, I used to do CNN, so I am like an investigative, independent journalist. And I've done a lot of freelance. When I lived in South America, I was interacting a lot with the government and with different information that led to. Whoa, trippy.
What was that?
I don't know. Sounded like a
gun?
Yeah, could be, but maybe it was something fell.
Probably something fell, but sounds like a gun.
Please
don't let anyone get murdered. I have to fly out tomorrow.
I think we'll be good.
So listen, I want to get back to Tartary.
Yeah, that's a good call. All right.
Okay.
Where are we?
I want to have you on the main show sometime.
Dude, we should. We'll do it. It was good.
We'll have you Skype in.
So we were at the Jesuit bit. Okay, so the Jesuits excommunicate this pope, and they put him back into power. And at that point, they start rewriting history. And so in the 19th century, it's like 1920s that some countries start using Gregorian calendars. Russia, Romania, they don't all use those calendars until literally like 100 years ago, 70 years ago, some of these countries. So we have plenty of chronological differences. And so that's when the Soviet Union gets into Anatoly Fomenko. And so Anatoly Fomenko is this dude, and there's about 1,000 guys who worked with him, but they wrote these Russian encyclopedias that are thousands of pages each about history, and they're really just like Google Maps. Like, they show you web crawlers, but this is by hand, of these 12 kings, birth, death, and these 12 kings, birth, death, are the same kings, 1,000 years different, 100 years different.
Yes.
And the Catholic Church.
That's what these guys were talking about.
Yeah. So that's true. That part's true. There is literally a bunch of kings that are the same king several times over that the Catholic Church has rewritten stories about, and we know this from saints. One of the craziest, coolest things the Catholic Church has done.
Explain the king thing one more time for everybody.
Okay, so the Catholic Church would take a lineage, and you have a lineage of 12 kings in a row, from father to son for 12 generations, and then it'll say they're born on this day, and they lived 81 years, and then this king was born, and he lived 60 years, and this king lived 17 years, and then he had his brother take over, and it's like, we're talking like a number of cases. Like, this might be 100 or 1,000 different books. I think it's at least 100 books that are 1,000 pages long of these events. And it's crazy how many of these events. I mean, granted, not all of the Fomenko.
And what would the Catholic Church do with that?
Well, okay, so the Catholic Church
you have King Burger King, who gave birth to King McDonald's, who gave birth to King Wendy's, which gave birth to King Subway.
Right.
So, what did you say the Roman Catholic Church did?
So what you do is you've got like a story from the 700s, and then you say, or from the 1700s, and you say this happened in the 700s, and so we actually have had this history and these maps, and we've been running this country.
So they were saying
forever.
that some was happening in the 1700s. They said it was really the 700s.
It's ancient, and we run it, and we've owned it forever, and we actually outdate your peasant class that is the native people, and this is how you steal a country. If you look at right now in Italy, so Italy didn't exist, right? There was no country called Italy. There was, the Roman Empire, but there was Etruscans, and you go further back. What's also funny is the German lands. So Austro-Hungary, if you go right now to Italy, in the northern parts of Italy, they speak German. Like, not Italian. How? Why? Well, because in World War II, they rewrote the maps, and they said everything has to go back to the way it was before.
Do you ever hear the theory that the Nazis didn't lose?
Yeah, Douglas Dietrich has some interesting stuff on that. I think the idea of the Japanese winning or not losing, not surrendering, is interesting. I don't know if you've heard about the Japanese aspects, but the pictures of their surrendering, samurai have to relieve their swords. They did not relieve their swords, and the flag that they surrendered to is not an actual American flag. It's a flag they made themselves. It has the incorrect number of stars, and the stars are upside down, which is trippy. So, I don't know. I don't think the Japanese quite surrendered. There's definitely some weird stuff there.
Because the theory is, it's like, if the Nazis lost, why did only 15 of them go on trial? And was Hitler allowed to die peacefully in Argentina?
Well, so the weirdest theory to me, I mean, I don't know if it's the weirdest, but you heard the Mary Amschel Rothschild story, right? So his mother, Anna Maria Schicklgruber, left pregnant with
what
a
do you
pension.
think about that?
Well, I think if she left pregnant with a pension, I'm not calling it a foregone conclusion. But yeah.
Do you think Hitler was a Rothschild?
I think that if that's the life he grew up with, then it doesn't matter because it's a duck that quacks. At that point, everyone's assuming it around you. Everyone historically around him would have assumed that that's what's going on. So it's probably true. But even if it wasn't, it's the rumor that he lived.
Why would Hitler be any different than any of these other leaders?
Well, I mean, that's the point. I think if he was that different, then it shows that the people who tried, the 15 that they executed are people that tried to end the war early. So it could be what it was they used him to instill this authoritarian vibe so they could reset culture. All of these countries had to conscript, and it's again, resets are huge. When people start to get culturally independent, start to build up wealth, use a war, and you can completely devastate it. And Khazaria is a great example of that because in the 700s is when the Umayyad Caliphate comes through, and you've got the Tatars. The Tartarians are essentially, this is what's, everyone knows sort of that the Tatars existed in Khazaria in Georgia. It's just questioned if they were anywhere else. That's what's funny. But I believe they were all over the world before this. And so what happened was there was a trade network. And you have and I studied anthropology, and my teacher in school actually was the teacher that helped decrypt the Mayan script. Her kid actually figured it out on the property because the phonemes and the symbols, they start to blend together, and you realize that there's 200 symbols that work together. All over the world, there are different symbols that connect, and they all have this kind of, we've talked about these, Graham Hancock talks about that kind of idea of that these things are all part of some alien. I don't think it's necessarily that. I think it's this. You have, instead of a military dictatorship, you have a trade federation. Look at any racial ethno-state like Japan in the Edo period, and they're cool, they really isolated themselves into not being progressive enough to succeed. You look at an Iranian or Roman trade empire. The more cultures, the more kinds of people, the more they interacted, the more they traded. You look at the Dutch East Indies Company, the biggest company in the world, bigger than Apple is today. The way it works is... The Dutch East Indies Company, right? So what happened was the Spanish Armada fell apart because they had all these Dutchmen that they controlled, and they thought that they controlled them, but through nepotism, the Dutch were running all the ships. And so eventually they're like, we could just take this. And then they took over, and so the Spanish Armada became essentially the Dutch East Indies Company, and they were, if you look at New Amsterdam, this is another cool thing: is star forts, right? Bastion forts everywhere. Wall Street is one of the walls of a star fort that was torn down. So with Tartaria, star forts are essentially a cultural symbol that are everywhere, and they're
star forts.
Yeah, bastion forts are what they're usually referred to by the mainstream media.
What's a star fort?
So it literally looks like a snowflake. It's a fort that has perfect defense on all sides because you can go from any direction. If you think about, you've seen so many.
And you're saying Wall Street shaped like that?
Wall Street's one of the walls of a star fort.
What do you mean one of the walls?
So each wall that makes up a star, is one of the walls. And so you think the Pentagon is essentially kind of that idea. Some of them have 7 sides or 13 sides. In Holland, they're very common. You'll see snowflake-shaped cities everywhere. If you look at the Statue of Liberty, it's on top of a 7-pointed or 8-pointed, I think there's an 8 or 11-pointed star. These are all star bastion forts. And so Hawaii has them, Japan has them, Russia has them, China has them, Africa even has them. And the more we look, they're everywhere. And that's the thing that connects, is this idea that instead of being this isolated group that hated each other, they were like in endless summer. The triangular trade was stolen from them. And originally, they would just, when it was winter on one side, they'd have things from the other side of the equator, and they just continued to trade. So there was probably this great trading empire. It probably had great amounts of technology. Tartaria probably had pretty close to what we consider like steampunk level. Like you look at the Heroes engine and things from the libraries of Alexandria and the plumbings and the things that they had. They did have what we would consider highly advanced technology. Even in the 1800s, we're seeing things that were stolen from them, like that could lead to us believing they had electricity. And one of the examples is radio-based pantelegram machines. Pantelegram machines are these swinging pendulums with a pen on them that you can send over radio pictures because it draws X, Y, Z coordinates. And so, you could send a newspaper from the Alamo to Russia over Morse code style telegram lines in the 1800s. So we had fax machines in the Old West. It's crazy to think what they had back in the 1,000 years ago. And one of the weirdest ideas is that they were using electricity and energy from steam from volcanoes. That could have been a major reason why Tartaria fell too, is this Krakatoa, and Campi Flegrei and these volcanoes. That's I tend to hope that that's really what it was, because we see a lot of examples of environmental disaster. But whatever happened to them, afterwards you have dudes with hidden hands, like the Masonic hidden hand shirt thing, taking over all of these places. And every story they have, like if you know Morals and Dogma, is Albert Pike, the Freemason, who wrote the most important book to the Freemasons, like the 33-degree be-all, tell-all, in the 1800s. Albert Pike, he, in Morals and Dogma, the most important Masonic book ever, mentions Tartaria, I think, about 11 times. So, and that was kind of what got me thinking, like, okay, I should probably look into it more. Like, why do the Rosicrucians care? Why do the Masons care? And I started realizing when the Masons say, like, oh, we have the secrets of Atlantis, what they're saying is, like, they have, in Tartaria, like, they have the secrets of each Atlantis is a star fort. And there's thousands of them. There were autonomous city-states that were allowed to trade. Like, that's what we're talking. We're talking about, like, so much cooler than the Dark Ages. And what we have left of it, is there are...
And you think, what happened? Do you think just slowly over time they changed history? Was there like something that...
I think it was pretty immediate. I think that essentially you have a complete rewrite, starting... you have to remember the Jesuits used Latin.
Do you think the Earth could be flat?
I mean, I think that holographically speaking, like reality, space-time foam, like if you think with the universe and multiverse, space-time foam, I'm from Santa Cruz, right? UCSC mathematicians have talked a lot about space-time foam being this constant holographic, expanding everythingness. So in a sense, sure, but like it's not what it means. A better question might be, do I think that everything that NASA has ever presented to the public is completely accurate, true data? And I would say probably not. That's a separate question. If I think we're on the back of a turtle, I think.
You think we're on the back of a turtle?
No, I mean, I feel like Flat Earth gets that kind of vibe.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm pro people having different ideas and not believing what they're told.
I'm really getting into this thought that this is a realm and it can be anything you want it to be.
That's electric universe.
If I sat down with two guys who've done a ton of research and they presented you Flat Earth and presented you Ball Earth, you could easily go, you both have great arguments and I don't know what it is. Totally. It's like George Bush. It's like Trump versus, Biden.
Yeah.
Like, depending on what you want this realm to be, is what it is.
Yeah, I think to a level, but I think they also can hypnotize people into believing something pretty strongly.
But that's also mentally, though. You are seeing what, even if you're hypnotized to see it, you are seeing what you want to see.
If you took a piece of paper and you folded it 10,000 times, which you can't do, obviously, back and forth, because of every time it gets half double sized, it would be as wide as the solar system, supposedly, right? So this is this idea, like, we can fold things, and when you fold things holographically, everything is all at once here now. And that's very hippie thing to say, but it's metaphysically and physically true because of what we understand about antimatter and dark matter and radio. It's everything is in one place at once and simultaneously.
It's like a book.
Yeah.
So you're thinking that there's no time. It's only everything is happening right now.
I think time is one of those things where you don't fully throw the baby out with the baptismal water because it's causality. And causality means that my choices have effects and consequences, and I'm for that. I'm surprisingly for that in this generation. I think we should have, try to make good choices and all. But also, yeah, I think time is explained wrong because it's just the decay or difference between two states, right? And the states are the same thing. So really, cross-sectional awareness is so big. And like that's what Teilhard de Chardin, I don't know if you've heard of Teilhard de Chardin, but he's like a Jesuit metaphysicist who invented singularity theory in the 30s. And Julian Huxley had to publish his books because they wanted to hide him. He's basically the priest from the Exorcist movie. But like they did not want his books out, and they sent him to China to get rid of him, to kind of bury him, and he found the Peking Man, which was like the missing link in evolution.
What is it? Who's the Peking Man?
So the Peking Man is like Bigfoot again. It's like another bipedal cross-sectional hominid that defies this idea that Adam came out perfect after God had made a bunch of animals before him. It's that instead idea that there's different kinds of humans that are all doing different things, and we're all different kinds of consciousness.
This is so interesting.
Like, even think about how your wife and you choose each other, and then the kid comes out and is different because of that. Like, that's such a beautiful kind of conscious evolution that DNA can do, that we can create based on hybridization what we think is important. Like, that, there's nothing more scientifically, technologically advanced than that. So that's what, so Chardin figured atoms are socializing, not just making dust, they're making jade and diamond. And geospheres become biospheres, and biospheres become the new sphere, which is the mind. And the mind is the only real thing because it transcends everything and things can change,
Damn, dude, that's some shit right there. That's some real shit right there. I gotta get you on the regular show.
Dude, we went pretty hard. That was beyond Tartaria.
Well, I'm all about that action.
Yeah, we just tinfoiled actually.
The weirder the better, man. Can you send me a copy of this? I want to put it on my Patreon.
I definitely appreciate that, and yeah, I will.
And then I'll have my I'll give you my number once we stop recording. You can call me, and we'll get you into.
You're in LA though, right?
Yeah, we'll get you on. We do it on Zoom. We can do Zoom.
I live often, like when I'm not here. Like my family's from Ventura, so I'm around also. But yeah, dude, that's legit. This has been cool. I appreciate that.
I could talk all day. You sound like someone I could listen to forever. But yeah, man, it is super complex. I believe we're way more special than they want us to know, and everything happens for a reason. I think there's high frequency, low frequency.
Extremely low frequency.
Extremely low frequency.
Elves,
Elves are low.
Extremely low frequency. ELF.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Schumann resonance.
But they're not good?
No, they're good. I think ELF, Schumann frequency elves are probably on my side.
I mean, there's like high frequency, which are like higher level consciousness, and low frequency, which is these demon dogs that seem to be wanting to bring pain, suffering.
You've heard about the VLF band that we've created?
No.
So in the last 100 years, because of radiation that we've pushed outward with electricity and the FCC radio waves, there's a nuclear VLF band, very low frequency band, that's protecting us from outside, which some people relate to the firmament as well.
Do you think there's a firmament?
Well,
do you think we've been through that firmament?
The firmament does exist and is the Van Allen belt. Beyond that, there's also a VLF band, and there's a number of things that we could apply the term. Again, I don't like to throw words out with the bathwater. Like, you could use the word for whatever's true.
Do you think we've been through the Van Allen belt?
I think that's kind of the thing. I mean, there was a bunch of people trying to get through it in the South Pacific, and I'm not sure how that worked out exactly. I mean, even after my time at NASA, I did like internships, stoichiometric research for nanotechnology at
What's
Moffett
your IQ?
Field. 152 was like the last test I did.
Is it fun, or is it a curse?
Definitely a curse, but it's fun. Life is a fun curse, but you wouldn't want to not have it,
How's it talking to women with this IQ?
I mean, I can screw up all the time. That's no problem.
Well, you just gotta find the right one. The right one who understands what you're saying, dude.
That's true. I think it might have,
Yeah, I'm sure. I think it's gonna be fun. I think you're fine. I think It's a wonderful conversation, and
We'll have to do a thing on ELF and VLF and John C. Lilly. You know John C. Lilly.
well, I want to have you on to talk about this theory that there's different kind of human beings.
Yeah. That
what
might
that
help a lot of
represents.
people, man. I think that's the thing that people are
But
afraid
real
of.
quick, so I get these feelings and these instincts, and it's just based on just spider senses, dude. And I feel it, and I kind of put it out, and then a lot of time they end up being true. And it's not, I don't bet 1,000. Nobody bets 1,000 in life. But my theory is that Tartarians and Khazarians have something happened between them. And that is why they not only destroyed the USSR, that they even though I think Putin is a Freemason and he is a weird part of the cabal in a way, but they still want to pound on. They want to pound on Tartaria and the Russians.
Right. It's gnarly.
And
it's super gnarly. And Putin's put out Tartarian maps in the last few years, and he's got some people that are all about the Tartarian history. If you've seen the CIA documents on Tartaria, in the 1960s, they were talking about how we need to educate the Soviets on the history of the Tatars. So there is some weird stuff there, for sure.
And it's why does the World Banking Organization work with China and not Russia?
Okay, well, this is, I don't know how, so do you know China didn't used to be China, right? And this is where the Uyghur story gets interesting. You've got Manchurians were wiped out by the Spanish flu. So about 100 million Chinese Manchurians who were not Han Chinese. You have to remember there's 300 different ethnic varieties of people living in this huge landmass that we call China. Russia's huge, China's huge too. And you've got blonde people, redhead people, 300 different languages. Today there's about 52 different languages left of the 300, and they're all a quarter at most of who they were before because they've been ethnically cleansed and they've been forced to be Han Chinese. But, that's going to upset the Han government right now to hear. But Tibet is not Han, and this is a great example. Uyghurs are not.
The Han government here?
No, in China, in the PRC, right, in the People's Republic of China, you have now a group of people which have spanned, we think of 1 billion Chinese people, but they're one ethnic group when there were tons of others. There's 300 other ethnic groups. And, there's a movie that Quentin Tarantino distributed in the United States, Hero, a Chinese movie with Jet Li. And it's all about the different groups of China being eliminated and one group trying to get one of their symbols to be saved into the final new language because they got rid of all of the languages and they got down to one Chinese. And Mao simplified that. So it's hard to read the old Chinese. So they're very broken from their history. We know more often about China than Chinese history than China does because it's been forbidden for them to study. But, the Uyghur were Chinese. Manchurians were Chinese. Genghis Khan had red hair and blue eyes. So it's a very different China today than it was before. And the same thing plays out in terms of the flu being the cause. We have this thing now where the flu happens in China. The Spanish flu was also considered the American military flu. And so what happened was we brought the flu, and China and Europe wasn't, definitely going to World War One. Basically, the Austro-Hungarians were doing all right until this biological warfare happened. But the Spanish flu was brought in, and when it got to China, where there were tons of Europeans, there was French, there was the British, Hong Kong was totally British at that point. It was decimated, and the Manchurian people there's almost none left, from 100 million to less than 1,000, and those were the royal families. So the royal families were gone as well. So what we have in the last 100 years is a completely new history, a completely new people that run China, and they don't want you to know because then they would have to give maybe some credence to these. We might have to consider them like Native Americans, or the New Zealanders consider them Maori. At some point historically, you might have to pay reparation. No, history will be erased.
Unbelievable.
Guys, it's been incredible. I was hoping to first be on Sam's podcast. Amazing that he was on mine first. So What do you know?
Yeah, man. I'll put this out. I'll put this on my Patreon if you want me to.
You're the best, dude.
And say, yeah, man. You should come on. I'll give you my number, and then you could come on my main podcast.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartaryans.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.